Hello, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. My name is Eric Doyle, and welcome to OGV Energy Live, our interactive live stream show, which is all about bringing you the latest news and insight from the energy sector by bringing to life the UK's leading energy industry publication, of course, OGV Energy magazine. Each month we bring you features and interviews and discussions with our partners from across the publication and industry to update you on all the very latest news and opinions on our fully interactive platform. So don't be shy with your questions and comments throughout the show. I'll pick out as many as I can to put to our guests. This month is the decommissioning issue, as you can see here, as I've already shown you, for the magazine. So we're going to be welcoming guests and contributors who featured articles in the publication, as well as our supporting partners in this sector. Remember, this show is all about you, so don't be shy. Tell us where you are in the world. I'll make sure that the chat is on, which it is. Drop us a little note. Tell us where you are in the world. Tell us what you do for a living and who you work for. Look upon it as a little free marketing exercise. Your marketing team will love it. Throughout the show, you can ask comments or ask questions or make comments or ask questions of our guests. And the good people at OGV Energy put a little incentive in here. The best comment or question of the day will receive a free article or editorial piece for their company. So that will go down really well with your leadership team. So it's about decommissioning. And this month we're delighted to welcome along Sam Long from Decom North Sea, Lee Hanlon from Sescon Decom, and Dylan Perras from Subsea, Stena Wells as our headline guests. We're then going to move on to our industry spotlight section, where this week we're going to feature Mike Adams from Norwell Engineering, Gus McCaskill from Zinc 360, and Rebecca Allen from the North Sea Transition Authority. Before we head into our regular Market Watch segment with Westwood Global Energy Group and the Energy Industries Council. So we've got a fun-packed show, and we're going to end the show with a special guest. Maury Melhuish is coming on to talk to us about his recent partnership with OGV Energy to host the new Let's Talk Transition podcast for OGV Renewables magazine. Maury is going to let us know who he's interviewed so far and how your organisation can become part of this. Let's say hello to some of our lovely viewers. We have Beth Alexander, who was first out of the blocks, here supporting Gus, I guess, from Zinc 360. We have Andrew Slesser, the man with the finest name I've ever heard in my life, Willem Boon von Oxy III. Thank you for joining us. Naved is with us also. Thank you so much for joining us today. And tell us who you work for and tell us, oh, you're in Suriname. Brilliant. Thank you. Right. So keep the comments coming, keep the questions coming, and we're going to get into it. Now, decommissioning. The magazine's all about decommissioning. Everything in here is about decommissioning. The regulatory angle, the operator's angle, the service company angle. And I don't know anyone who's in this sector who's not involved to some degree. But let's now move into our headline interview. We're going to bring some people at the top of the tree on to have a bit of a discussion and give us the very latest in what's happening in the sector. Welcome, first of all, Sam Long from Decom North Sea. Good to have you with us, Sam. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Nice to thanks for hosting us, Eric. Much appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Here's Dylan from Stena Wells. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, brilliant. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we'll bring on Lee Hanlon from Sescon Decom. How are you doing, Lee?
I'm good, Eric. How are you doing?
Oh, very well indeed. It's been a bit of a crazy day, bit frantic, but we're here and we've got some lovely people. Let's say hello to some of the lovely people that have joined. Let's see. We've got Kirsty, Commission Project Engineer at CNR International in Aberdeen. So this is going to be absolutely pertinent to Kirsty. We've got Claire Hepworth, who's come in and joined us. Hello from Repsol Sinopec Resources. Fantastic. And Rachel Clark has also joined us. Hi, Rachel. Thanks for joining. These people are doing it perfectly. Tell us where you are. Tell us what you do, and tell us who's with us. It's great to see you all here, and thanks for joining us. So, Sam, we're going to start with you, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine by me.
Put you in the hot seat right from the start.
That's what we're paid for, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So you are you still currently interim CEO at Decom North Sea?
No, Rachel Cregan will shoot you for saying that, Eric. I took on the full-time role in September of this year, so that's not pushing through.
Very good. So you're right at the top of the tree where you rightly belong. And for those who may be tuning in from further afield, can you give us a bit of an update on just exactly what Decom North Sea are all about, or Decom NS?
Okay, so Decom North Sea has existed since about 2009, when the decommissioning market was a bit of an unknown for the buy side and the sell side. So neither the operator nor the contractor really had an understanding of what were the activity types, what was the work breakdown structure, where were the yards, the types of leads, where were the stenows, and who was going to do the wells. So these things were they were early pioneers. You could go to conferences and shut the door on 200 folk, and that was it in the global world. We've moved on a fair bit now. We're in 22. To some degree, decommissioning activity is mature. And then on the other hand, the supply chain and the operator are still evolving the right model to work in there. I'm sure Dylan will touch on some of that for his piece, and Lee as well. It's good learnings out there. But from a DNS perspective, we're a trade body, we're independent, not for profit. Our goal is really to promote safe, efficient, effective decommissioning that creates jobs, but is also doing the right thing for the industry.
Very good. Thank you very much. Just a reminder, any questions for Sam, Lee, or Dylan, please put them in the chat there, and we'll put them to them. Now, Sam, back in the day when I was involved in the service sector, murmuring started coming out about decommissioning, and everyone got really excited. And I remember we had a standing joke that everyone took their business cards and put on in biro in decommissioning, whatever they were doing. And everyone was claiming a little bit of decommissioning. So we do this, but we also do decommissioning was becoming a thing. And then they also added on and renewables on the end as well. Late life and decom as a fundamental work stream. Where are we with that in terms of the severity and seriousness of this concept in the sector?
I would argue that decom is a baseline activity that's there. It's got numerous branches that reach into the energy transition and a relevance there in terms of skills and transferability and keeping the supply chain busy in that period. We are never going to see a tsunami. The period you refer to might well be the 2012, 2014 kind of window when we saw yet another downturn in the industry, and there was this broad assumption that everything would rush forward for decommissioning. Even more recently with the energy profits levy, we're not seeing any kind of direct impact on that activity. We need to remember in the UKCS, many of our assets are now 40 years old. They were designed for an operating life of 20 or 30, and the same could be applied in Suriname or Gulf of Mexico or Brazil. We're starting to get towards the physical end of life for many of these assets. It's almost inevitable that they have to come off the street. The challenge is with climate change kicking in, there's even more imperative than there's ever been before to think about who are the emitters, can we take them out, and what's the role of taking them out? Plus, the overall liability of the industry is to tidy up what we put out there in the first place.
Very good. And that link to, and it's a link that I never made in the early stages, but now we're reading a lot more of your material as well coming out, solidly linking the subject and the topic of decommissioning in parallel with upstream decarbonisation, and that's been further, more cemented in our minds now, right?
If you look into the North Sea transition deal and the agreements that were made in the COVID era of what were we going to do about decarbonisation of the industry, a lot of attention goes on the brownfield modifications, the electrification, the things that sound very exciting and are new to the industry. In the Norwegian shelf, they're not that new, but for the UKCS, they were new. But the reality is the money that will be spent on that generates a certain proportion of the decarbonisation of upstream, but it's really the decommissioning activity that takes out the larger emitters that delivers the greater return. So it's almost an 80-20. Now that 80-20 is a bit false. It's not based on the real numbers, but in terms of effort and return, by taking out a number of assets between about 10 and 11 of the major emitters in the UKCS, we hit many of our decarbonisation targets. And then I'm going to fall back on the argument that decommissioning enabled us to keep various trades on and offshore alive in the period during which we slowly move out of the hydrocarbon era and we move into the post-hydrocarbon era. And we all know that there's grand ambitions for many jobs and what the future of the post-hydrocarbon economy will look like. You're not going to transfer 100,000, 200,000 jobs instantly from a hydrocarbon to a non-hydrocarbon. We've got to make a transition. That's why it's cool. That's why it's named as such.
Absolutely. And just touching on that, some of the deeper challenges that you're seeing regarding jobs and recruitment and people transitioning into that. What are some of the challenges that we face?
I suppose, so there's some great numbers out there. If you go speak to the people who are, first up, a note of reassurance. If you go speak to civil servants and Scottish or British level, you'll realise that there is some deep thinking going on about where are these skill sets needed. I sat in yesterday on some industry calls around wind, and even the wind sector is deeply worried about are we overcommitted? Do we have the materials and do we have the people to hit those targets? We're clearly at the same resource and people constraints. in the green economy as we are in the hydrocarbon economy. We're typically looking for the same skill sets. We know that if you speak to people at Skills Development Scotland, they'll tell you the number of welders we need in the future for floating wind and for decommissioning is something like 3 times what we already have in the market. So that means then we need to be thinking structurally about, well, where are these individuals going to come from? Where are the college courses for them to get qualified in, and how quickly can we deliver on them? We're in a really confusing mix. Many people will be aware of that right now. The pressure to change is immense. There's limited resources. We're all looking at the same thing, even in decommissioning. And I think arguably in decommissioning, it's less sexy. Let's be totally honest. In 2014, 2012, we would go to decommissioning events and they would sell out. Now it's wind that sells out.
Lee Hanley just shook his head there. He disagrees. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. It's very sexy.
Yeah, careful. Industry leader says it's not sexy. Look, the reality is decommissioning is never going to have the allure of hydrogen or
Yep.
some of the other things that are coming around the corner. That they're always going to be the new thing, and everybody wants to be doing them. But this is 2.5 billion of activity in the UKCS per annum for the foreseeable future. It's a $9 to $10 billion market globally for the next 20 to 30 years. There is opportunity to be had. And in the North Sea, we are often the class leaders and the industry set goal setters for the rest of the industry. Hence why you've got an international audience popping up today and why we have an international membership. People want to know how it's done in the North Sea, what is transferable and what's not. It doesn't mean that everything we do in the basin is spot on. Obviously, Dylan and Stella and Sescon are class leaders and it's awesome. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here speaking with us today, Eric.
Oh, you're good. You're good, Sam. You're very good. You're very good. Excuse me, you got a bit of a chesty cough, but we'll get through it. You've got some lovely slides that you'd like to show us. Shall I put them up just now?
Go for it. We've probably covered a lot of it already, but go for it.
Let's do it. There we go. Look at that.
Okay, so I'm Sam Long. I'm Chief Exec for Decom North Sea. I'm quite well known by many folk for late life decarb combination. I come from an environmental background. Actually, I joined the industry in the early 2000s. Always been long-term passionate about getting the end of life piece right.
Right.
There's a degree in there about sustainability, meeting our obligations, and all the other factors we've already talked about in terms of economic output and employment. My remit at the moment is to kind of reposition our organization to make sure that we're ready for what's coming around the future. And you'll find that at the moment, I'm quite keen on the notion that these skills are transferable between the renewables, nuclear and oil and gas sector, and that we should be promoting and encouraging people to think about it as a career area rather than just a part of oil and gas activity. In the bottom left, you'll see that I've got a slide that I often talk to called Confluence of Winds, but it's really a reflection of the fact that from my career beginning as an environmental lead, you would talk about things like climate change and it would always be on the right. Let's slide that one out and we'll worry about it when we get to. Here we are in the 2020s and suddenly climate change, the circular economy, just transition, all these principles, they're all landing at the same time. I've written Brexit in grey because Brexit's a political rather than a macro factor. But my point is, all of these things are landing at the same time. We could have seen them coming in long-term trends. We haven't. We're now caught in a corner as an industry and as a global community. It makes it very challenging. But decommissioning is an essential role of the energy transition in all of those sectors. And so it's something people need to just bear in mind. It isn't going to go away. This is an obligation and it's an opportunity.
Very good.
Go on, Eric. Next slide.
Next slide.
There you go. So my argument to members and non-members, to government ministers when I speak to them and others is that really decommissioning is a bridge. It is an activity that gets us through the energy transition. As I've already discussed, there's this baseline activity of about 2.5. NSTA, Rebecca and team have got a new cost estimate. They're going to present that at the ODC event run by OEUK next month. I would argue that for Lee and for Dylan, there's a decadal backlog. Not many other people can go and look into an activity space and say, I'll still be doing this in 15 or 20 years' time. So it has some unique characteristics to it. As I've already outlined, it does have a role in decarbonisation, but not just here. In many basins in the world, by removing the heavier polluters, we are going to accelerate the decarb agenda. And there's this skills piece. It's really, really important that we retain those skill sets and we find good employment before the new jobs emerge. The challenges are, as we've already discussed, recruitment, retention, and resources. And then this perception thing about it. Is it sexy or is it not sexy? I might have to find a better word than sexy, but
Yeah.
I'll let Dylan smile, and Lee can sell that one better than I can. My keywords here are: I would encourage people to think about decommissioning as an opportunity. We need to diversify that thinking. It's not just about oil and gas, but it obviously is often dictated by oil and gas. I do think we need to engage within our industry and outside it. And I will always advocate this, that it's never going to be a tsunami, but it's solid work. And professionals and companies like the two individuals who are going to speak after me, there's money to be made here.
Fantastic. That solid work that you mentioned, a kind of off-piste question, but is it government proof with all the instability that we see going on and the uncertainty with what's happening here in our daily lives? Is that solid tranche of work immune to government, shall we say, shifting?
There's at least one civil servant is in the chat right now saying hello to me, who I could point a question at. But I was speaking to another civil servant yesterday who the general agreement is yes,
right.
because it's currently set in legislation that we do this work. It's the right thing to do. And so I asked that question of, does the constant change in administration at the moment have an impact? And they felt that what we see is, it depends on the relevant minister if they're coming back in from where they were or it's a new portfolio. But underneath that, if you think about the macro changes, macro drivers, they're not going anywhere. Ukraine isn't going to resolve itself quickly.
Correct.
We are never going to get back from the decarbonization challenges that we have ahead of us. So the macro drivers remain the same, regardless of whoever's in political control at that point in time.
Thank you, Sam. As Daniel Hyland quite rightly pointed out, please put your questions to either Sam, Dylan, or Lee as we progress. And remember, there is a prize up for grabs. The best pointed question or comment. The production team who are watching in the wings will pick the best of the day, and you can win a half-page advert or editorial for your company, and you'll be a superstar. Let's move on. Thank you, Sam. Absolutely perfect. Lee Hanlon, CEO of Sescon Decom. How's life?
Good. Busy.
Good and busy. Good and busy. Enough said. A man of few words. For those who don't know what Sescon's doing and where your focus is, Lee, could you give us a bit of an update?
Sure, yep. So the company itself, we're a decommissioning service contractor, from initial studies and surveys offshore through offshore preparation of assets for removal. Mm-hmm. We work with the heavy lift market for the removal piece itself. Then we obviously deal with the onshore dismantlement, recycling and reuse of the assets when they're landed on the quayside as well. So pretty much the full decommissioning life cycle, but a focus on the back end of the reuse and recycling aspect towards the end.
Very good, very good. And where are you geographically these days?
All over, in short. But in terms of geographic location today, we're in Methil and then it's Track 5 on the east coast of Scotland. We will be in our new facility in Aberdeen South Harbour next month or next week actually, from November onwards. And we are building the first and only purpose-built decommissioning and marine maintenance yard in Brunei just now as well. So we'll be open there. Q4 2024, Q1 25.
Outstanding. We'll come back to that in just a second. You mentioned reusing, recycling, and that's key, and perhaps something we didn't think of back in the day when Decom first came around. But it's become a major part of what you do now, is this whole circular economy piece. Do you want to tell us about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So when we first had the idea to establish the business, you can see with the company logo behind my head here, it's not a halo. It's based on the circular economy, ultimately. So when we look at an asset that's due for decommissioning or dismantlement and recycling, we look at the materials and the fractions. There's got to be something we can do with this. It doesn't just get scrapped or go sent to landfill. There got to be options for everything is our outlook here. So our whole company ethos is based on circular economy and what can we do to maximise reuse and recycling. So we've spent a few years working on that now, and ultimately we've got pretty much a reuse and recycling route for everything apart from asbestos. So if we look at the last 2 or 3 years that the company's been in formation, across all projects, we've achieved over 99% reuse and recycling of all materials, and right now we're about 99.4%. So we're very, very close. And I would love one day to be sat here in a few years' time saying we're the first company in the world to achieve 100% reuse and recycling of an offshore installation.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So that's materials going back into circulation, but also equipment being moved on and being repurposed and reused, right?
Exactly, yes. So, I mean, the way that I try to explain it is the equipment on these assets could be 40 years old, design life of 25. So initially the value, it's like a bathtub curve. Ultimately, the value was up here. When it was new, it decreases because it gets old and it becomes worn. But then the spares and parts to replace these assets in these facilities diminishes completely. So the value of what's left comes back up again. So we've got the opportunity to identify what we can for reuse, plant equipment, materials, pumps, valves, all your usual stuff. And if we get early visibility of that, we can go offshore potentially, and we can identify what we can reuse. Then we can market that. So before the topsides and various structures arrive at the yard, hopefully we'll have enough time to advertise that, to market that, and to get it sold, or a route for reintroduction back into the market before it even gets there. And that's key.
That's fantastic. Yeah, great news. Can you tell us a wee bit about your plans for Aberdeen?
Sure, yeah. So down in Methil, we established the yard there about two years ago now. And ultimately we've designed it, and this is where we come into Aberdeen. We've designed the yard and the way it operates, that when you come through the gate, we're trying to base it on an offshore installation. So in terms of health and safety, permit to work, toolbox talks, risk assessments, PPE, we're trying to emulate what we have offshore, because the health and safety standards and performance offshore is obviously really high. But I think we'll all agree it's been a bit lacking over the years on the onshore piece. So we're trying to lift that. So we created a blueprint here in Methil, Energy Part 5. The operations are slick, it works extremely well. And obviously we're just coming to the end of the first major project there, the Spirit Energy DP3 and DP4 assets from the Morecambe Bay, which has gone extremely well. So we looked at Aberdeen as well. Surprisingly, over the last 10, 20 years, there's been no specific decommissioning area with an incumbent contractor there for some reason. So if some small subsea structures come in, they go to one location for decontamination, they go to the next for processing, then they come back to the harbour for going back onto the vessels for offload. So we're looking to put that into a turnkey solution.
Right.
We'll focus on the subsea market probably as a base case due to the continuation of work and the frequency of the work coming in, and we'll hope to bring in structures with full decontamination, removal of norm, processing, removal of anything for reuse and recycling. Then we'll put the materials back on the quayside again and off to Europe for recycling. So everything will be done in-house in the quayside with minimal carbon footprint.
Very good. And Sam spoke about this solid body of work. Do you share that view? I'm guessing you've got future forecasts into what's happening. Your view on the market outlook and any certainty or uncertainty around it? So
decommissioning to now has been the promised pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and it's been continually pushed to the right. So there is decent traction now. I would suggest there's been a step change over the last couple of years in the market, and it has really picked up. I think there's going to be another slight increase in workload from 24 onwards.
Right.
But right now it's a lumpy business we're in. So Sam touched on the fact that we have to convince people it's a sexy business. Maybe interesting is a better word, and complex rather than sexy. And we have to sort of educate those who are not directly involved in what we do. It's not just a scrap operation where we bring assets in, we just simply chew them up with an excavator with a shear. But there's 12 months engineering up front, there's work packs, there's job cards, there's a whole structural analysis piece as well. So there is a lot of work coming up. I think the bulk of the assets to be removed will commence in 2 years' time from now. But what we are seeing in terms of the pipeline, it is substantial. And that will cause some issues in terms of removal capability and onshore yard capability as well, due to the competition with offshore wind as well. So we're all kind of, as Sam mentioned as well, we're all pulling for the same resources here, the same skill sets. However, we're also now vying for the same heavy lift vessels and the same yard space as offshore wind. So something's got to give here.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for that, Lee. It's more of a comment than anything else. Shozi Jafferi from the Department of International Trade in the UK. Totally agree with Sam that UK supply chain leads globally on many disciplines in decommissioning, and there's a real opportunity for us to, I have to come out of there, a real opportunity for us to export our UK expertise and win work in overseas markets. Well put, absolutely terrific. Dylan, you sat there patiently, wait until the end. Some would say we kept the best till last, but I'm not going to say that. Everybody's equal here. Dylan Peras, director at Stena Wells. How are you? How's life?
I'm fantastic. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on. Life's good. Life's busy. It's something we, building on what Sam has said there, is and some of the comments Lee's made around everybody's busy, but we're busy waiting, and that's
Busy
exactly
waiting.
what what we're seeing at Stena and Stena Wells. So, for those people that aren't familiar with what Stena Wells is, hopefully everybody's heard of Stena Drilling, a world-renowned drilling contractor with rigs in the North Sea, 2 semis here in the sector, and then 4 large drill ships international. So we're a local source provider and an international source provider, and where we look to bring Stena Wells is bring engineering expertise on top of that, and provide a one-stop shop for well construction and decommissioning. In terms of decommissioning, we're talking about nearly 50% of the total decommissioning bill in the UK being wells. To why we need to do the work, it's legislated, but it's also the major accident hazard. Your well is the pipeline to a large energy source, which we want to maintain in place and under control. So the work does need to be done, but the one thing I wanted to get across this afternoon is decommissioning is great, and operators care about decommissioning until they don't. And that may sound flippant, but for those of you that don't know me, I've recently just jumped sides of the fence. I was until very recently a drilling manager for a well-known operator here in Aberdeen, and a long career of drilling and decommissioning wells. And the decommissioning budgets, the decommissioning scopes within these operators are very, very cash intensive. And when an opportunity comes to add production, protect production, or decommission, the balances tend to change quite quickly as to priorities. And Sam and Lee have already said the rush isn't coming. And if you look at the business plans of most of the operators, you'll see the big decommissioning projects about 3 years out. And they've been 3 years out for about the last 5 years, if that makes sense. That big bow wave of work that everybody wants to get their hands on sits just at the edge of everyone's planning, the strategies, the businesses, the budgets, but never quite moves in. And then we see, the fight for resources and current government policy, and the fact that you can recover 91 pence of your pound for your energy profit levy through new investment. Do you go decommissioning, or do you try and recover as much of your EPL as you possibly can? So we're in a difficult place, I think. And one other thing I'd just like to say there, and we've got some people from government online, is we need to protect those resources, the people in place, the equipment. An example would be decommissioning of a semi-submersible rig or cold stacking. We're talking tens of millions of pounds to reactivate these units. We're talking about hundreds of people retrained from new to go out and undertake this. These are equipment, this is equipment, and these are people and skills that we already have. By maintaining the flow of decommissioning alongside other activities, we will be able to maintain those skills, those resources, and then manage that transition as we move into decarbonization and energy transition. So I've said a lot there. I've built on everything Sam and Lee said. So
I just asked how you were doing.
I'm doing great.
You're doing great. No, fantastic. We could keep this conversation going on forever. Unfortunately, we're constrained by the hands on the clock. We've been told for years. I remember back in the day when attending all the decommissioning conferences, the key is collaboration. The key is collaboration. Are we collaborating? Are there still challenges with collaboration? Is it even happening?
So, giving a view from both sides of the fence, from the operator sense, there's a reluctance and a risk. From the service company side, there's a desire to engage, and there is a constructive team building attitude. But those happen at very, very different points in the timeline of a project. Now, to truly collaborate, the team has to be put together at what I call select and define, at the very early stages of project development. And those in the operators will know when working in a gated project delivery system. But rather, we're brought on at the end of define and the beginning of execute as the contract and the tenders come out. It's very difficult to add value or take risk when you've been brought in with the engineering work complete and most of the decisions made. So in terms of collaborating with the operators, it's difficult when you come in late. And commercially, I've spoken on this in public before. We struggle to make agreements commercially. And I believe that that's something OEUK and NSTA could help us with. The logic-based contracts that we utilize today were built through the Crine initiative in the early 90s, and those contracts are still utilized today. Where is the 12th contract in the suite? There's 11 current contracts. Where's the 12th? Where's the multi-operator, multi-service contract that we can utilize to support these projects? That tool would be a massive enabler, and it's just a piece of paper that we need to make.
Cost reduction in a new era that came out when?
Mid-90s, 95, I think.
90s, 95. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and things have changed. Things have changed dramatically. Gentlemen, we could speak to you guys all day on this topic. It's absolutely fascinating. Claire Hepworth from RSR UK sent in a nice question, and it's for either Lee or Dylan, or maybe Singing in Harmony. Have you seen any alternative contracting models being suggested or implemented by the operators? Are we actually seeing it coming from the operator? We'd like to change things. We'd like to create alternative models. Is that coming?
Yeah, I can maybe lead on that one. So for a while now, or traditionally today, we've been working under the EPRD contract model. So the removals contract would be issued to the heavy lift market, and they would then subcontract the yard piece under that, and it would be a back-to-back contract flown down, top down. For me, my personal opinion, the heavy lift contractor does their part, removes the asset, drops it off at the yard on the quay side. The transfer of liability happens there.
Right.
They should be gone. They should go. They've done their piece, really. Go back to what they do expertly well is the lifting piece. And we should potentially directly contract with the operator, because ultimately the heavy lift market's got nothing more to do, but they sit and hold the liability because it's through the contract. So yes, there'll have to be a discussion around liability. The risk for the operator is if we deal directly with the yard and the yard isn't ready, then we've got the liability commercially for the heavy lift vessel sat there waiting. But that's the same if the yard's not ready for the heavy lift vessel. There's liquidated damages there anyway.
Yeah.
But that's just good project management. You give a decent call-off window and you're all prepared together. So I think there's maybe one or two operators looking now at that potential model. How could it work directly contracting with the yard and just pulling the heavy lift vessel in for the removals piece only? So that would change the market a little bit, and it would take out an interface, and it would probably work a bit smoother as well with direct discussions and engineering with the operator who ultimately owns the asset and knows it best.
Very good. We've come to the end of our allocated time. We're a wee bit over, but I don't think anyone's going to shout at us. You can see the names and the organisations on the screen: Sam Long, Decom North Sea, Dylan Perra, Stena Wells, Lee Hanlon, Sescon, Decom. Please connect with them on LinkedIn, where we're showing right now. Please extend the conversation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We will catch up with you later. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So that was our headline section. We never make these long enough. We need to make them slightly longer so we can get into the nuts and bolts. Thank you so much to those guys for their time. We're moving into our industry spotlight section, where we feature organizations and professionals who are at the sharp end, who are actually inside this, getting on with it. We're going to welcome Rebecca Allen from NSTA. Hello, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Pride of Ayrshire. Well done.
Well, so people say.
So people
I
say.
mean, I let other people say that. Far be it for I.
Absolutely. Gus McCaskill from Zinc 360. How are you, Gus?
I'm good, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Brilliant to have you with us. And Mike Adams from Norwell Engineering. How are you doing, Mike?
Good, Eric. Good to be back.
The last time we were speaking about comfort food. We're going to be way more serious today.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. There's a time and a place.
There's a time and a place, absolutely. Rebecca, we're going to come to you, decommissioning engineer at the North Sea Transition Authority. For those who might be slightly further afield, who are not in this part of the industry or in this geography, just a bit of an update on what North Sea Transition Authority is all about, please.
Yeah, definitely. So for UKCS Oil and Gas, we are the licensing authority. So with that, we are really looking after, from a decommissioning perspective, two elements. We're looking at from really the cost effectiveness of the whole piece, and also making sure that we're maximising reuse and repurposing of infrastructure where possible. But also, because we're the licensing authority and the wells are drilled under licenses, we also are the consenting authority when it comes to the decommissioning of wells. So we work mostly one-to-one with operators, but we do work with supply chain as well. But we're working with operators to make sure that they are maximising reuse and repurposing of infrastructure, decommissioning in general in a cost-effective manner, and are basically keeping to their regulatory commitments when it comes to well decommissioning.
Very good. Can you tell us a wee bit more about the sort of campaigns, the well decommissioning campaigning that you guys are involved in?
Yeah, definitely. So I was, first of all, thank you very much to the three speakers from the first session. I was backstage Erie-Wigan, and it was very, very interesting. And I was very pleased to say, to hear Lee say that he is noticing a significant step up in activity over the last couple of years, which is really encouraging, because that's one of the things we've tried to really do over the last couple of years, is focusing on stimulating the market, because we've obviously understand and are very sympathetic to the fact that, as many people have commented, decommissioning has always been the prize at the end of the rainbow, that the can just kept getting kicked down the road. And we were encouraged to stop that for multiple reasons. One, because obviously from a supply chain perspective, how can you have confidence in a market that doesn't appear? But also because from our position of being people that can see holistically the whole data set, we obviously understand that the further you kick the can down the road, the more of a problem you're making for yourself in the long run. But we have had a specific focus area on well decommissioning over the last couple of years, particularly trying to encourage collaboration within the market to ensure that we're abandoning wells in a cost-effective manner. Because obviously, if you are a large UKCS operator with a massive portfolio of wells, you can achieve significant economies of scale by abandoning your wells in one campaign. But if you're an operator who only has a handful of wells or a handful of fields, and they all cease production at different times, when we're in a market where we're all competing for resources and competing for the tooling and the rigs, how is this operator who's only got, a handful of wells to do going to ensure they get a really decent contract and collaborative relationship if they don't work with other people? So I will really say I need to give credit to industry here, most certainly. I mean, we were talking about campaigning, and particularly for wells, for years. And we were, scepticism, I was certainly one of them. However, I can really positively say, particularly over the last year, that industry has really responded massively to the challenge that we placed to them. And my credit goes to the operating community and the supply chain community for making this happen. We're in a position where we are seeing multi-operator well campaigns being talked about more, contracted and actually executed. So we're in a position now where when we're maybe talking 2 years ago that this was a pie in the sky idea that none of us were really confident would happen, we actually now know within the UKCS of at least 5 multi-operator well decommissioning campaigns that have either already started or are soon to start. And that is a absolutely significant achievement that everybody needs to be praised for.
And I guess it comes back to Lee's question or Dylan's question. How are they contracting? That would be interesting to know.
I mean, there isn't a one size fits all.
No.
And I do completely agree with Dylan that it would be absolutely fabulous to have that one contract that everybody signed up to and had confidence in and were comfortable that their risk was managed appropriately through this contract. I've not given up hope that that will happen, but unfortunately we have been in a position where there have been multiple work groups trying to make this happen and we've not got there yet. I would like to think it's still possible, but the campaigns we're seeing happening are being contracted in a multiple ways. We've seen one operator who's got the vast majority of the scope contracting directly to the supply chain, and effectively another operator who's got a smaller scope piggybacking onto their contract. We're seeing ones where it's the supply chain that has aggregated the scope and they've got separate contracts with each party involved, and they're working to share the mobilisation, demobilisation and indirect costs across the party so that everybody gets a benefit. So unfortunately, there isn't a simple answer.
Nope.
From my position as somebody that just wants it to work, I'm just saying any way that people can get this to work, I am massively in favour of. But I do wish that there was a much simpler way that everybody could be happy to sign up to.
You mentioned data being crucial to all of this.
Yes.
Do we have the level of data and market transparency we need? Is it available? And do we have that level of transparency?
Well, from our perspective, we're certainly trying to do as much as we can to improve that. So we have at the NSTA a significant volume of data sources that we make publicly available. So a few that I could mention, we obviously have our Energy Pathfinder, where oil and gas operators post details of jobs and upcoming scopes they've got. So awareness is raised to that, to the supply chain. We've also got our Suspended Wells app, where we've collated key attributes associated with the inactive suspended well portfolio of the UKCS. So this is wells that are ready to be decommissioned now. We're making that information available of who's the operator, where's the well, what's the current status of the well, so that work is there. But we're always keen to add more data and make more information available where possible. So an ask that I would have of the audience is, I will admit I'm not the best in LinkedIn, but if you do message me, I will get back to you. If there is any data that is not currently available that you think would be very useful, please let me know. And if it's within our gift to make it available, because obviously there are commercial sensitivities we can't breach, but if there is data that we can make available, we will certainly do our best, because we recognise that we can't, say to supply chain that there is a sustainable market here if we can't show that the market is there and the data is available to enable them to put scopes together.
Thank you, Rebecca. We're going to come back to you in just a second. Let's pull in Mike Adams, founder of Norwell Engineering. Good to have you here. A question I asked you the other day, full disclosure, I said, how important is decommissioning and everything that surrounds decom to you as a solid engineering company in that space? And I found your response to that quite interesting. So I'll ask you again, how important is decommissioning to you as an engineering company?
Yeah, no problem. And I will just point out I'm general manager of Norwell as well. But yeah, I mean, and really quickly, actually, Rebecca's points were spot on from my opinion, coming from the kind of the technical and the very much upstream end of decommissioning in terms of early engagement and consultancy. I really enjoyed the data question, because a number of those data sources we use now, especially in terms of kind of making our plans. And I think, yeah, that ties into your question, Eric, that, we have seen an increasing amount of activity, increasing pressure on the supply chain. And we have seen that in real time over the past probably 12 to 18 months, to the point now that decommissioning is something we're talking about on a daily basis. And it's something we've always done. That certainly well P&A has been a fundamental part of our business for 30 years, but the broader decommissioning discussion and how it relates specifically to the North Sea and the allocation of resources and the supply chain and the pressures that we're now feeling, and the role of regulator as well, has become a huge part of our kind of day-to-day conversation. And I think looking at the supply chain and the pressures that we face, and this is where some of the data comes in, the supply chain really needs to obviously expand, but I think create dedicated functions that are now supporting these scopes, and the scopes are now available in decent kind of regularity, that supply chain companies can, with the help of data, make real plans in decommissioning and create those kind of purpose-built solutions.
Very good. How much of this hangs on technology?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Willem from Spirit had posted a good question earlier about scope reduction and kind of, basically, yeah, how do we do this with the resources that we have? And that resources is time, it's money, but it's also people, and it's the supply chain as well. And obviously, technology has a big part to play there. From our side, as kind of independent, a technical body, I think we have quite an important role in that technology space. We are not technology developers, but we certainly have a role in evaluating technology to be used on these campaigns. Dylan mentioned early engagement. We're always talking about in terms of adding value. The earlier that we can get involved, the earlier that we can look at some of these new technologies. A big thing that we've been doing over the past couple of years, increasingly, has been working to help verify, from an independent perspective, verify the deployment of these technologies, and we've done that both on the operator side, who's maybe looking to propose a new technology and needs to kind of create a case that's independently verified to present to regulator. But also we work on the regulator side, working to receive that case from certain operators and then really understand that. And yeah, I mean, everyone has their part to play. So in that piece of work that we would be doing, you've got the technology company playing a key role in developing something new to help cut scope or reduce cost. You've got the operator trusting in that company, working with them to develop that case, essentially. You've got the regulator with an open mind, and then you have to have people as well going, okay, we'll have a look at this. And from our side, keep an open mind to accept some of these, new justifications, and some of this technology is fantastic.
In terms of challenge, we've spoken quite a lot about the numerous challenges that we have. In terms of what we're facing in the decom space, how are Norwell helping to support these?
Yeah, I mean, I think having that dedicated focus has been a big shift for us, and it's always been something. And I think that this is replicated throughout the supply chain. That in many parts of the supply chain, these challenges have always been things that we could tackle. Maybe we do from time to time, but the level of activity that we now face requires genuine, dedicated solution, not just a part of the website that says decommissioning, but a strategy around how we are going to tackle this, looking at the data that's available, engaging with both existing clients, but kind of industry bodies as well, as supply chain businesses, going, okay, this is a real, it's an opportunity from a kind of business case. But at the same time, this is something that we kind of all have to come together to help out on as well. And I think that's a big challenge. That's been a challenge for us, kind of going over that ledge and saying, okay, no, we have to have a kind of dedicated approach to this. It makes sense. Our clients need it, and yeah, that takes time.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. We're going to circle back if we get an opportunity. Remember, folks, while we have Mike, Rebecca and Gus here, if you've got any questions to put to them, please do. And we've even got some meetings happening in the chat. People arranging presentations and stuff like that, which is just a joy. Let's flip over to Gus McCaskill, project manager at Zinc 360. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well indeed. All this chat about decom. What does decom mean to? Well, first off, can you remind us what Zinc 360's sort of main reason for being is?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for inviting us in here.
Pleasure.
It's a great opportunity to actually do something with OGV, so thank you. And it was quite interesting to actually hear what Mike was saying about technology and where we sit within the decommissioning side of it, and basically the energy sector as a whole. So we are primarily a digital solution platform, visually capturing your asset, whether it's decommissioning, operational or not. So that's our background of it and our software solution as well. So it's the visual side of it combined with the actual software side of it that we can then collaborate with third parties, actual operators, in delivering a visual replica of your actual asset.
And we've been reading a lot of brilliant material coming from you guys. I know that Beth's in the audience today.
Yeah.
That whole subject of digital twin is just fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and clearly beneficial to the whole decom piece. Where does decom sit as a value in your organization? Is it the top of the tree, or is it another thing that you're involved in?
It's everything's at the top of our tree.
Of course.
I mean, because decom, it's a hard nut to crack, I would say, from a visual aspect. Even going back when this technology first took off, decom was always a hard nut to crack back then, because it was almost a nice to have solution. Right. And back then you were actually speaking about words about digital transformation, visual aspects and that, and it was always a nice to have. Now it's a necessity now in the whole industry right across the board. So, the value that we can offer to the decommissioning side of it, is we're basically a focal point, a sole source of the truth of what your asset is and what the state of it is like, especially in a decommissioning side of it. And then taking that visual side of it into the software platform, where you, as an operator, can actually then tender out to third-party vendors for winning contracts pre-decommissioning. You can actually also sits within your inventory management, providing a clearer documented state of an asset when it's handed over to removal contractors, right down to the end users of the recycling yards, and assisting in the pre-planning and the demolition safety management, both which I think are quite important in the decommissioning side of it. Other added values of actually getting a visual capture of your decommissioning project is, you can visually identify hazardous areas. You can tag different equipment, whether it's to be removed for recycling, or it can remain there as a whole, going straight to the yard to be decommissioned. So these are very good added values that we can see actually getting a visual capture of your asset done.
And you guys have actually been at the coalface. I mean, you've used this technology, this digital replica, digital twinning on live decom projects, right?
We have, yes. And we were heavily involved in the southern North Sea assets, unmanned platforms, with a major client there. And we still are involved now into refinery sides of it, but certain blocks of refineries that are now decommissioning, and actually adding in more technology, tools and different things within the refinery side of it, that they're actually decommissioning old parts of it. So yes, we're offshore, primarily in the southern seas, but now into the refinery side of it as well.
Terrific. I'm just going to throw this out to, I'm sure Rebecca or Mike will probably jump on it. But the what Gus just mentioned there about reuse and recycle, and we had it a lot from Lee Hanlon, in the wells space, is that so prevalent, that whole circular economy piece?
That's a very interesting question. Yeah, there's that's a increasing topic of conversation. I mean, that's something that certainly we speak about regularly on this end, is that wells and that critical wells infrastructure is not over. With, as assets are decommissioned, and just broadly speaking, oil and gas generally, that both the skills and the technologies that we have concerning wells infrastructure, but the infrastructure itself is critical long term. Obviously, it's totally case by case, and in many cases, assets, once they're at the end of their life, from an integrity perspective, it's just not cost effective to reuse them. But the concept of a well has applications right through the energy transition, certainly extensively in carbon capture, in geothermal, in a range of different areas. We really see that as like a fundamental piece of the energy mix. And how those wells are used or reused, is a really exciting part of that.
Very much so. Just closing with you, Gus. Any key lessons that you would pass on to asset owners or even anyone who has an offering in that space? Any key lessons for decommissioning from yourself?
Yeah, well, again, it was something else that Mike brought up, and engaging very early in decommissioning projects. Even leading up to the COP and through the decommissioning execution phases of a project. We've learned through early engagement and adopting our digital technology. It adds value through multiple levels, which is making decommissioning delivery more cost effective and efficient. So yeah, engaging us at the early stages is very valuable.
Very good, very good. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. You can see the names, you can see the companies. If you'd like to extend that conversation and move it forward a little bit, please connect with these people. Rebecca will connect with you at some point when she looks at LinkedIn. You will, right? You will.
Yeah.
Yeah, at some point. It's been a pleasure to see you guys. We're going to move on to our Market Watch section. We will catch up with you again. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye-bye. Great stuff. We are going to move on to Market Watch. So I'm going to bring on Davina from the EIC and Baz from Westwood Global Energy Group. How are you guys today?
Really great, thanks. How are you, Eric?
I'm just thrilled to be here. It's been a crazy day. I literally ran in, switched the computer on, and we went live. So we're doing this a bit by the seat of our pants, but it seems to be going well.
I'm just happy to be present, honestly, given that I had a bit of an internet issue just now. So I restarted computer and ran on and was like, hello.
You're here and you look and sound clear as crystal. Baz, good to have you with us too.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be here.
Thank you very much. And we're going to start with you, if that's okay, because we love a good Westwood Global slide deck.
Sure. Let me just get it up. Just check. Can you see that?
Let me see. I'll just bring it on the screen. There we go. You are live.
Sounds good. So I'm Behzad Aib, Senior Analyst at Westwood Global Energy Group, and I cover the global offshore wind sector on our WindLogic's market intelligence tool. And every month within the OGV magazine, we provide a market update across field developments, offshore rigs, and the offshore wind sector. So let's get started with the offshore field development update. So oil and gas related EPC contract awards announced in the last 30 days are estimated to be at $10 billion, bringing the year-to-date total to $36.7 billion, excluding letters of intent. So this represents 54% of total EPC award value anticipated in 2022, driven by 187 subsea trees, approximately 2,300 kilometers of SURF, 3,000 kilometers of pipeline, 13 floating production systems, and 62 fixed platforms. During the period under review, major final investment decisions announced include BP's Cyprus project in Trinidad and Tobago, Shell's GKJE Phase 4 development in Malaysia, Total Energy's Phoenix field in Argentina, as well as ONE-Dyas's N05A project in the Netherlands. In terms of key EPC contract awards recorded, these include Petrobras's award to Sembcorp Marine for the construction of the P82 FPSO, and a similar award was given to Keppel for the P83 FPSO, and both these contracts are valued at over $6.1 billion. Moving on to our offshore rig update, the global committed jackup count sustained at 386 units in September. The available and cold stack jackup count stands at 47 and 54 each, with both marketed, committed utilization and total fleet utilization maintaining at 90% and 80% respectively. 19 new fixtures were fixed in September with a total of 8,871 drilling days, whereby more than half of the fixtures came from the Middle East region. Moving on to semi-submersibles, the count dropped by 2 to 67 this month. There are 15 available rigs and 14 cold stacked units. Marketed committed utilization declined from 84% to 82%, while fleet utilization fell to 70%. A total of 13 new fixtures with 1,748 drilling days recorded. And most notably, General Hydrocarbons were awarded a 1-year contract for dolphin drilling semi-submersible Blackfoot Dolphin to work off Nigeria commencing in the first quarter of 2023. Finally, looking at drillship demand, this stayed constant at 76 units, leaving only 5 units available in the market, with another 15 rigs cold stacked. Marketed committed utilization and total fleet utilization were maintained at 94% and 79% respectively. 13 new contracts with a total of 2,153 drilling days were awarded in September, of which the Southeast Asia and North American regions represented 21% and 54% of the drilling days. And finally, looking at the offshore wind sector, since our last update, Vestas has been selected as a preferred turbine supplier for 3 offshore wind farms. The turbine OEM has been selected to supply its new V236 15 megawatt turbine for wind farms located offshore the UK, Poland, and the US. So a total of 76 turbines will be supplied to the Baltic Power wind farm in Poland. 72 turbines will be supplied to the Inchcape project in Scotland. And the company will also supply turbines for the 1.5 gigawatt Atlantic Shores project in the US. In terms of, I guess, the main news that occurred over the month, the Celtic Sea lease areas that are planned to be offered by the Crown Estate in the UK's 4 gigawatt floating wind lease round have been refined. So the size of zones 2, 3, and 4 have been reduced, and zone 1 and 5 have completely been removed from the plans. Crown Estates has announced that the areas will be further refined and reduced in the coming months, with the final lease areas being offered via competitive tender scheduled to be launched around mid-2023. And finally, in Canada, so another, I guess, new region, new country, and looking to enter the market, the province of Nova Scotia has announced a target of awarding 5 gigawatts of offshore wind lease areas by 2030. The lease areas will be awarded via a competitive tendering process that will be jointly managed by the province and the federal government itself. And the first call for bids is scheduled to take place in 2023. Now they've said the plans are once the first 5 gigawatts have been awarded, they will, I guess, look and see if more lease areas will be awarded based on market opportunities at the time. And that is our sort of roundup of the news.
An excellent roundup there, Baz. Thank you so much. I'm just going to take that off the screen. You mentioned the Celtic Sea's floating wind round. Now, this might be a naughty question to ask you, but what are your own thoughts, or what are the market's thoughts on the UK's position in that floating wind sector? Do you think we can get to the point where it's matching the sort of fixed bottom market?
I think that will take a long while to hit sort of the fixed bottom. I think that'll be well into the 2030s, 2040s. But I think in terms of the UK's position as a market leader, that could potentially happen, particularly because we currently, I think, are the first country to have had floating wind projects operational, so Hywind and Kincardine. So we've got the early mover advantage. On top of the 4 gigawatts for the Celtic Sea lease round, there's the 4.5 gigawatt Intog lease round as well, set to come. So that's being planned out within Scotland. And that's sort of, I guess, a new way of using floating wind to electrify oil and gas in the North Sea. And then outside of, I guess, these 2 leasing rounds, you've already got almost, I think, 18 gigawatts of floating wind capacity that are awarded in the ScotWind leasing round. So there's a lot of potential to be awarded, and there's a lot of potential areas that have been awarded. And then finally, you've got the government's backing. So, the government have committed to having, I think, 5 gigawatts of floating wind operational by 2030. So there's a lot, there's the industry, there's government, and all the sort of different movers and shakers within the sector as well, looking into floating wind. So matching fixed bottom, I think, will take much longer. But in terms of being one of the leading markets, I think the UK has a very good position at the moment in terms of what
we will hold you to that, and we will check in with you in 3 to 5 years' time and see how we're doing. Behzad, thank you so much for your update. That is excellent. Thank you. Davina, always a pleasure to have you with us. We've had a kind of decom vibe to this because we're focusing on the decom edition, the decommissioning edition. Excuse me. What's your feelings on what the picture looks like for decommissioning?
Well, I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I thought it was overwhelmingly positive at the moment. And it's mainly because I just think there's a lot of uncertainty in the market at the moment. And this isn't just on like a global scale, it's a local scale as well. I mean, Baz, you mentioned, obviously, the government is obviously backing floating offshore wind at the moment. At the moment, we don't actually know what their position is on upstream decommissioning. And it's mainly because I've just received an email today because I'm part of, I guess, the group that was putting together the Global Decommissioning Export Strategy white paper with a load of the other trade associations and the government departments. And unfortunately, we've had to put that on hold. So it's not going to be released on schedule. So it's just very kind of up in the air. In terms of what we're seeing in the market, it's sort of a steady flow of activity, really globally. However, we're not seeing, I guess, the bow wave of projects that I guess was being talked about in 2018, 2019. And it's mainly because we've just had such a volatile cycle at the moment in terms of global oil and gas prices, really.
Right. Okay. So that's an interesting perspective on it. That's very interesting indeed. Do you see the North Sea continuing to be an area of opportunity for organisations and for new tech and new projects?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the North Sea for quite some time, I mean, UK, Norway, Netherlands, they've been proving grounds essentially for some of the newer technologies around decommissioning. To, constant optimization is always the key because the operators don't really want to spend as much money as possible on these particular types of projects. They always want to have cost cutting where they can. But yeah, I mean, there's a steady flow of activity that we're seeing coming out of the North Sea, certainly in terms of the UK sector. The Norwegian sector, not so much, honestly. A lot of those projects are on hold at the moment, according to DataStream, for the foreseeable future. And it's very much an emphasis on maximizing economic recovery.
In terms of CapEx spend, any news on major projects that you can share with us?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the areas that I was going to touch on a little bit was almost global export, because I guess that's the piece that I've been speaking about for the longest. And we actually nicely came out of a cross-sector decommissioning event that we ran in Newcastle, where we had like a lot of good questions, I guess, about exactly what the opportunity could potentially be for UK export into these new markets. And honestly, I always champion areas like Southeast Asia, for instance. So there's a lot of opportunity that we're seeing in Thailand and also Brunei. So we've also got Australia as well, and Indonesia. And I guess in terms of those markets, like off the top of my head, it's like the APAC region alone, I think it's expected to have around $100 billion worth of spend. And Thailand itself is quite an interesting one because a lot of people kind of have a bit of a misconception that it's quite difficult to get into the Thai market because of, I guess, the emphasis on local content, which is a hangover from, I guess, the CapEx side of oil and gas. Yeah. However, actually, a lot of players from the UK have been looking into this market recently. So, for instance, Sescon, so Petrofac as well, have been looking into setting up, I guess, a yard out there to do decommissioning. And we've also seen some of the Southeast Asian players themselves, so like Sapura Energy, also COOEC moving into that region as well and picking up some major decommissioning contracts out there. And I guess like a little bit around what some of the activity would be there. So Intermore very recently won a few contracts. So it's PMC Engineering, Procurement and Offshore Execute, and it's for the SPM Buoy 1 and 2 offshore there. So they're decommissioning that. In terms of Indonesia, so I will actually touch on Indonesia because it's an interesting market from an early standpoint, really. And it's because they're doing a lot of government to government work. And basically, there's a phased decommissioning project going on there, which is by Kanjian. So they are decommissioning the Terang, Sirasun, Batur fields. And they recently awarded a contract for the subsea structures to see how they can be decommissioned. And basically, it's very much a lot of activity, very early ongoing pilot activity, essentially offshore Indonesia. And they are very keen to work with global supply chain on this, which I think is the key here.
Very good. Thank you for that. Interesting stuff. A common theme throughout the show today has been the circular economy, reuse, recycle, and all of that. Is this something that you're seeing as being a potential growing market for the future, particularly in clean tech sectors?
It's a potential, certainly. I think this was touched on in the previous session too, about the circular economy. Yeah. And unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to have to mirror that a little bit because while we're seeing a lot of discussion happening around the circular economy, so for instance, we're seeing a lot of, looking into reuse of wells, reuse of pipeline infrastructure, especially around, areas like carbon capture, platform reuse potential for oil and gas and also hydrogen. What we're not really seeing is sort of any of that materializing in an interesting way. So it's like people are talking about it, but they're not very likely to do it. So for instance, like we were saying, we could potentially reuse like injection wells for carbon capture purposes. However, all of the new carbon capture projects that we're seeing, cropping up all over the globe are using new wells, so not anything refurbished. However, I have had a lot of potential clients come to me and ask about the potential for the refurbishment market. So there is interest. It's just that it's sort of answer foggy, ask again later, I think.
Okay, so a common theme also running through that people are busy waiting. Busy waiting, yeah, absolutely. Davina and Behzad, thank you so much for your input today on Market Watch. Always a pleasure to have you guys along. If you want to extend the conversation with these guys, their names are on the screen. The companies are there, EIC and Westwood Global Energy Group, Energy Industries Council. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll catch up with you guys later on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye-bye. Brilliant. So we're coming to the last feature of our show. A couple of shows ago, we tried to get this next guest on, but unfortunately we had some techie gremlins. So I'd like to make an introduction to the OGV Renewables podcast host, Maury Melhuish. Do we have you?
Hi, Eric. I'm here. Hopefully you can see and hear me.
Oh, you sound perfect. You're crystal clear. You sound absolutely terrific. I'm just going to put you there. That's better. Look at that. We can now see the lovely companies' names down below. It's such a pleasure to be. Yeah, I was so frustrated last time, but the internet got the better of us. Are you well? How's things?
It's all good. Yes, well and busy. I hope you are too, Eric.
Oh yeah, snowed under right now. Snowed under. Now you are hosting this Let's Talk Transition podcast, right? And having a lot of fun doing it and learning some great stuff. How's it been for you?
Oh, it's amazing. You're absolutely right, Eric. So in the podcast, we're looking to interview founders, chief executives, decision makers, and innovators across the energy transition. And you know what? We're meeting some brilliant people.
Give us an example. Give us some headliners.
So far we've had Ben Backwell. He's chief executive at the Global Wind Energy Council. We've had Dan McGrail, chief executive of Renewable UK. Dan Jackson, co-founder of Cerulean Winds. He's got £26 billion targeted to decarbonize the North Sea. We've had Alex Meredith. He is project director for Berwick Bank.
You're not messing around with these guests, are you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Berwick Bank, a £9 billion wind farm that could power Scotland twice. Superb. Apart from that, we've had Hannah Mary Goodlad, the head of Baltic for Equinor. We've had Molly Iliff, director of hydrogen at ERM Dolphin. Cameron McNatt, co-founder at Motion Energy, and lots more coming up too.
You are just having a ball. You've also been off on your travels, visiting some wonderful events, right?
Yes, I have. So I was through with the Aratellis guys through at Wind Energy Hamburg, which is an incredible, enormous renewables event, and up in Aberdeen too for the for the floating offshore wind event, which was organised by Renewable UK, that one, and a terrific success.
So from these events and from these brilliant interviews that you're doing, and your own knowledge of the sector, what sort of trends or themes are coming out that are sort of very pertinent to all of us? What are you learning from all of this?
I think what's interesting is, as you summarised the previous speaker talking about the market there, Eric, you mentioned the people were, busy waiting. Well, yeah. I think renewables is very different. People in renewables, there's a real eagerness. People are driving forward. Decisions are being made. The vision is big and getting bigger. And honestly, it's quite incredible. The vision and innovation coming out of these people is breathtaking and really admirable.
My goodness me. As we are hurtling towards Christmas, what's next? What's next on the Melhuish calendar? What's coming up?
Well, coming up, we've got a very exciting interview with the director of floating offshore wind from Ørsted. That's the next one I'll be recording in a week's time. And we're going to keep them coming. We've got lots of great people we're speaking with. Hopefully I'll be able to announce them coming through soon. But more innovators, more decision makers, lots of people with real drive and vision to share with us.
Well, you can tell from your passion and your energy about this that you're really excited about what's happening and all of the new tech and the new collaborations and new industry that's forming around this. So just as a reminder, I'll just put it up on the screen, OGV Renewables magazine, where you can see the transcripts of all these amazing podcasts. Can we actually hear the podcasts?
You can hear the podcasts and you can see them. You can, if you go on OGV Energy's website, click on play, then you'll see some of the podcasts on there. And one thing I'd love for the visitors, Eric, is, we're interviewing all these great people, but it is collaborative.
Right.
I've had great questions that have been suggested by all sorts of people, mostly through LinkedIn. And, if people have got questions that they want put to these people, let's have them.
Brilliant. So you heard it here first. Get in touch with Maury, fire those questions there. You might actually see your question being asked on one of these podcasts to one of these industry movers and shakers in renewables. Maury, it's an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you. We're going to keep track of the work that you're doing, and we'll maybe drop in with you in a couple of shows' time and just see what wonderful stuff you're doing.
That would be brilliant. Thank you very much, Eric.
Awesome. Thank you very much. See you soon. Ta-ta.
Cheers.
We've come to the end of our show. Maury was our last guest. The production team are in my ear right now telling me that Taylor Erridge from James Fisher has won the prize for today for the best pointed comment or question. Congratulations, Taylor. I'm going to see if I can pull that up. Or is it one of these ones that's appearing as LinkedIn user? Dan Hyland or someone from OGV Energy will be in touch with you, Taylor, to organise your free piece of editorial, half page or advert for James Fisher. Well done, you. Your management team will be delighted, I'm absolutely sure. So we've come to the end of our show. I'd just like to thank all of our guests today for letting us have a window into their busy lives and their insight. I'd like to thank the show's producer, Dan Hyland, and the show's designer, Ben Mackay. We are going to be back with you again on Thursday, the 24th of November at 2 p.m, where the subject and the theme of the magazine is going to be on international growth. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. Bye-bye.